selected as one of the 2022 Early Career Fellows for the Organization of Women in Science for the Developing World, and trying to help us at least kick off and start off with the public dissemination of the knowledge that we are going to generate in this project. So this will be one of the main deliverables regarding the public engagement. That's why we are here. That's why we've invited all of you to at least experience a little bit of what's going on as regards to the data we generate. We do a lot of research in isolation, specifically in our areas of expertise, and very few of us actually have spread out and collaborated with several other disciplines to come up with a solution. So we are trying to see and hopefully encourage you and have many followers and many departments coming together, the data that you've generated in the various studies that we do. We come together and see what can we do, what can we come up with regards to in at least some interdisciplinary breakthroughs. You can only go, like we say, a few steps when you walk alone, but when you walk with many people, you can reach far. So that's why we are here, and I hope you're excited and ready to join us in this lecture. We'll have several sessions with some of the workshop facilitators who will be introduced shortly, and I've had a chance of interacting with. Just to mention this as we go on, I think Professor Farai Munashe Shirobe is a mathematical modeling expert at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. We met 10 years ago. Please stand and wave. We met 10 years ago, and 10 years ago I was not very sure which direction I would take in my life, but I'm grateful for his guidance and mentorship. Professor Anna, Dr. Mugo will say the other name better. Yes, we met as a result of a collaboration between Mawazo Institute, and at the time, my name just came up when they were writing a proposal to do a summer school last year at Watamu. And because of my relationship with the institution, I got to meet, and they mentored me a lot with regards to writing proposals for workshops. Yes, and the team, Mr. Marvin Van Alst. Yes, also from Heinrich Heine University, Düsseldorf, Germany. I hope I've said it better. Anna is from Aachen University. And then we have Dr. Otto Mantegaza. Dr. Otto Mantegaza is a data scientist at Milan, Italy. And we have Tobias, Mr. Tobias Fenig. So when Anna heard that I was organizing this workshop, she said she will not travel alone. We only had funding for 3 facilitators.
Already scheming how I'll bring a bigger conference now that I have Marilyn and Victoria, and it's great. I just feel excited, and I think you can see my excitement and feel it. And this area is really very important and timely. Let me just give you a small experience I had yesterday. We were in a session. We're trying to acquire an ERP for the university, and when we got to the HR module, we were asking the service provider, are we able to have a system people can apply online, and we guide them through so that if we need, for example, for you to have a master's degree, we need the certificate. As you apply, you upload it. We need a PhD, you're able to upload it in the system. And they said, yes, we can do that. But then it occurred to me, somebody can upload a blank paper. You upload. Then I'm like, I need something that can read and say, yes, this is a master's degree from this. Then I remembered Marilyn and her workshop and the computational biology, the computational mathematics and everything that is going on and the AI. And I said, I might just get a homegrown solution. So Marilyn, are you up to the task? Excited about it, and I see us really moving forward. And of course, Anna, you're part of us already. We're not going to let you go soon. We're going to keep in touch and we'll keep bringing you back. And I hope the workshop participants, we did challenge you to walk around our campus. Did you get to Dam 5 yet? Yes. Ah, great. Okay. So VC, I really tried to sell our university. I have a PhD, prospective PhD student from Nigeria. Is she here? Yes. Great. Thank you. Okay. I think I'm too excited. I can just stand here all day. But let me contain myself and now invite.
Or two professional lines that seem to relish getting people lost. These are the people in computer science and the people who actually pursue physics. Physics, they will start telling you things about black holes, which swallow a whole universe. And it doesn't really make much sense, but they are very convinced about that one. The mathematicians also, but not to, as long as you maintain them below calculus, you are with them. When they go beyond calculus, now they are in their own world. So this is one of those that the rest of us get lost happily, and at the end of it we say, yes, we picked one or two things. But then again, as I said, I needed to manage risk, so I picked one or two things about the whole concept of maximizing the potential of data-driven approaches. So when all is said and done, it's really all about data, okay? And so I asked myself, what is it? For those of us who normally deal with data, there we are not yet lost because we know data is really information, statistics. That is data to us. And how do you use data? We use data for our day-to-day activities, isn't it? We use data to monitor whether you are always coming to work on time, isn't it? When you get late, data will tell us that on this day, you are late. When you start getting late several times, we say you are becoming an habitual latecomer. So that's the simple data that we use, and that we use it to make informed decisions. But today we are not learning about that type of data. I'm told today we are talking about what? Big data. And I'll tell you three things about big data from the little that I picked today. 3 W's. First, what is big data? And I picked 3 things that I liked. The rest they will tell you. I didn't like the rest, they were a little bit abstract. But I picked 3 V's about big data. The first one is volume. Huge volume. They come in volumes. The second one is velocity. They come fast. The third one is variety. They come in various varieties. So now, this is where the problem starts. How do you manage huge volumes of data which is coming at a very high velocity and a very wide variation? I think this is what they are going to take you through during this public lecture, ladies and gentlemen. So, they'll tell you very many things. For me, I'll tell you 1 or 2 again. The second why. So why big data? Again, it's about really, for me, as I said, I read very many things, but there's only one thing I liked. The first one, and this is about using it for effective risk management. After all is said and done, it's really about managing risk. How do we manage risk in our day-to-day lives? And you realize that if you use data correctly and appropriately, you can actually deal with many of the risks that you go through. If you are passing by a river, for example, just to give you an example, pass by a river every day with a slippery pole that you cross. If you want to use data to manage risk, you ask yourself, how many people have actually fallen into this river while attempting to cross, isn't it? If 10 or 20% of the people always fall in, then you manage the risk by actually looking for a safer route. I mean, you could be among the 20%, isn't it? So what I'm saying is that we can actually use it to manage risk. And that's why I liked that one. There will be others like decision-making, problem-solving. That's what they were telling you, isn't it? When they talked about problems of malaria and curing cancer. David already alluded to that. But for me, it's about that one. It's also about efficiency and effectiveness. Now, the second one, the third W, is where do we get this data from? Again, they talked about it, isn't it? Collaborative approaches. You see, we have different data about different things. For example, if you go to the health unit, they have data about us, how often we go to the health unit. If you go to the kitchen, they have data about us. What do we eat a lot of the time? If you go to, perhaps your bank, there's data about, your expenditure and all sorts. You see, all these things can actually be used to actually come up with very clear information about you as a person. You as a person, so that even when you want to calculate the risk of you defaulting in your payments, all this information which is scattered, compartmentalized, can actually tell you a lot about that particular person. So this is why this idea of collaboration really comes in. So, as I said, mine were three Ws, of course the 3 Vs that I've talked about, and I don't think I really want to go beyond that. As I conclude, I really want to recognize and appreciate the organizers of this workshop on computational modeling, and of course, encourage also the young, the students who are here, the young people in their fields of studies, that you really need to take advantage of this current big data, take advantage of the use of AI in actually dealing with resolving the issues that affect humankind. We are saying that handling big data requires some support. I mean, for you to be able to get all these things to speak sense, you will need some tools. And the tools are the ones that are going to be shared with you during this particular workshop. So pay a lot of attention. Look at your area of study, and you will most likely find that there is room for you to apply artificial intelligence in actually solving some of the issues that affect us as humanity. For us here, even taking the case of the Office of the Dean of Students, use of data can actually help you deal with very many issues that affect student life. So we are saying this is not just about practice, not just about research for the sake of it. There is application even as you move out of this room in terms of dealing with your work-related issues. If we want to understand the behavior of students, if we want to understand when a student has issues, if you maintain data about the student and you are able to monitor their behavior, you can actually pick up at the point at which a student, for example, starts having issues. And if you use artificial intelligence, you not only detect, but you also get a warning that certainly this person has behaved like this. Just to give you an example, if somebody has been very consistent, performing, getting A's, then suddenly the student goes down to B's, isn't it? Then goes to C's, then goes to D's, and then they fail. We have not used the data because we should be able to pick that tweak in the change from A to B and intervene in good time to be able to solve that student, because something must have happened. But for us, because we don't use data, many a times the only time we discover that a student has an issue is when they suddenly stop, isn't it? Or when they fail. That is when we start noticing that this student is no longer performing. But if we were to use data appropriately, these are things that we would have actually addressed along the way and would have actually saved that student from actually falling off. So all I'm saying is that use of data can really help us address very many issues, and encouraging us and challenging us to actually utilize the same for the effective delivery of service and the effective delivery of your mandate. With those few and very many remarks, ladies and gentlemen.
Program. I was looking forward to being with you on Monday, but it was not possible because I am rather in the house. Please follow the example that has been given to us by this team, led by Dr. Marilyn Rono. I will not talk so much because mine is really to open this public lecture, and I know especially those people who are following us online, gearing to go, and they are wondering why we are taking so long with the preliminaries instead of getting to the meat. So I will not keep you too long. So let me do what I need to do. Distinguished guests, esteemed faculty members, researchers, students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an honor and a privilege to stand before you today as we gather to explore the fascinating realm of collaborative research and its transformative potential in harnessing data-driven approaches for interdisciplinary breakthroughs. On behalf of the University of Embu fraternity, I extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to each and every one of you who joined us for this enlightening, yes, I think that's the correct word, occasion. The challenges we face today, whether they relate to healthcare, environment, technology, or social dynamics, often require multifaceted solutions that transcend the confines of a single discipline. The volume, variety, and the velocity of data being generated in different fields presents both challenges and opportunities that demand a paradigm shift in how we analyze, interpret, and leverage information. This lecture provides a platform to delve into the interactions that arise when researchers from diverse fields converge to learn how to analyze and interpret vast and complex data sets. It is within these intersections that innovation thrives and groundbreaking discoveries come to light. Our distinguished speakers, who are experts in their respective domains, will share their experiences, insights, and success stories that exemplify the potential of collaborative research to drive interdisciplinary research. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the organizers of this event who have worked tirelessly to bring together this distinguished panel and create a platform for meaningful discourse. I would also like to acknowledge our sponsors for this event, University of Embu, UNESCO, Organization for Women in Science for Developing World, OWSD, and Mawaso Institute, whose support has made this event possible. To the researchers and the students present here today, I encourage you to seize this opportunity to expand your horizons, engage in thought-provoking discussions, and cultivate connections that may lead to collaborative endeavors with the potential to change the world. In closing, I invite all of you to approach today's lectures and discussions with an open mind and a thirst for knowledge. It is now my pleasure to declare this public lecture officially opened. Thank you and God bless you.
Noted that in our areas of research, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we struggle a lot when it comes to blending biology and computational aspects of it. So we either have biologists who will collect volumes and volumes of data, and they will not, once they are done with the analysis, the data sits, Whereas the mathematical modelers or computational modeling experts will benefit, or they will do a lot with that data that is sitting in your labs, yes? So we realize what will happen if we have at least start the process of training young African researchers to utilize these skills in their project. That's why we are here, and the workshop that has been going on involves diverse fields of interdisciplinary researchers from various institutions, as you had when you were starting. This has benefited more than not only our students, but it has benefited students from various parts of the country, East Africa, and other countries as well. So what our goal is going forward is at least to continue transferring this, at least some skills in computational skills. These researchers have done a lot in programming this week, and I think the first 2 days, if you could have seen their faces, you would have felt sorry for them. But by last night, they were very happy, yeah? So So when you clearly see that programming is not as difficult as we sort of think, there is a lot going on. So I will begin by telling us at least the genesis of where it all started. And I was hoping we are almost there now. This is just a brief story of how the research lab started. I stand before you to shed some light on a remarkable journey, one that comprises the spirit of innovation, collaboration, and the boundless possibilities that lie at the intersection of computational modeling, artificial intelligence, and healthcare. So our story begins at collaborative efforts that established the Innovate AI Health Lab that you have been seeing around in the material circulating, an endeavor that showcases how collective intelligence can reshape the landscape of healthcare as we know it. Is this working? Okay. I will perhaps ask you to just move to the next slide. In the years 2018 to 2021, I took part in a study that attempted, you can leave it there, to understand the HIV/AIDS transmission dynamics among the young people in Kenya. In this study, we formulated various mathematical models to understand the HIV transmission dynamics among the Kenyan youth. These models were sex-structured, and its variables were differentiated according to their susceptibility. Further, the variables of these models were differentiated according to the status, HIV status, knowledge, comprehensive knowledge of HIV and AIDS, HIV/AIDS status awareness, and the use of HIV intervention strategies such as HIV testing, screening, condom use, and antiretroviral therapy. Highlighting some of the key results of this study are as follows. In the slide that you see above there, we considered only a single strategy at this stage, comprehensive knowledge of HIV and AIDS. So what happens if we increased comprehensive knowledge of HIV and AIDS? What was interesting to note is, given that the model was sex-structured, if we increase comprehensive knowledge alone in the male population, the susceptible population of the females was protected. Don't go to the next slide, just keep it in the previous one. So what you see on your extreme left will be how the population of the female youth susceptible population will be, they were not reduced much to the infection. But the population that we increased the knowledge in, that is the male youth, was significantly reduced. So that part indicated that increasing knowledge for one gender only protects the opposite gender, whereas the increasing knowledge in the other gender again protects its opposite gender, while itself it's being reduced to the HIV/AIDS infection significantly. So if you move to the next slide, what happens to the infected populations at that stage? If we increase knowledge significantly to both populations, we'll see that the infected population will stabilize at higher figures, which is not good when you are considering control. Yes, what you want to see is the infected population reducing. So if you move to the next slide, just previous one, thank you. Yes. So where you want to see in control of infectious diseases is the infected populations reducing. So the second model considered a combined control approach. So a combined control approach, previously we only considered a single control strategy, which was not good enough. The second model considered a combined control approach for which we had some population adhering to the control and others not adhering. Those which were adhering, as you can see in the lower graphs, would be reduced. The reduction was lower compared to those who were non-adherent. But if the controls were significantly increased, then we see a significant reduction in the infected populations. Next slide, kindly. So what we discovered then, what about the prevalence of this HIV/AIDS at this stage among the Kenyan youth? Our model that we developed, that is the solid line, we were able to fit into data. And for this, then we'll try and tweak some things a bit to see what we can predict out of it. So first, what we saw was at least some control, in as much as it was low, was good enough for the reduction of HIV/AIDS disease. We have seen, we have the control of HIV testing, condom use, and antiretroviral therapy, whereas the proportions were low at that point. We could still see that it was doing something in reducing the disease, the prevalence of the disease. When then, just next slide kindly. Of course, we can also see from that model, the prevalence of the female is higher than that of the male. Next slide kindly. Then if we increased the combined, the controlled combined strategies and say, let's make it, let's increase its efficacy to say 0.9. At this stage, you're saying 1 is the highest efficacy that you can achieve in this model. So we said, why don't we increase these controls to 0.9? And what we could see, if we pair that model, the controls of that model, what is not showing in that figure is we also combined it with societal attitudes towards the youth's use of HIV/AIDS control. So what we were seeing here is a perfect case where we can significantly eradicate HIV/AIDS or significantly reduce HIV/AIDS in the country. But what is happening among the youth in the country? We saw in the figure on the right, we are seeing a bit of reduction first. The disease peaks, it reduces, then it peaks again. When we increase the negative attitudes in the society towards the use of HIV/AIDS among the youth in the country. As I invite Dr. Consolata and Dr. Victoria, the story continues. At this stage, when I approached this study alone, that is how far I could reach. You know, these are the results you can communicate, but what action can be taken at this stage? What action will we take to ensure then a solution that is that has high efficacy reaches the consumer, the youth? What do the youth need? How can we help the youth to ensure that we do not see the prevalence peaking? Well, the data shows currently that HIV/AIDS is increasing among the youth, and there is need for innovative techniques. You know, you cannot call the youth in a setup like this and teach them HIV/AIDS. We have HIV/AIDS in courses, right? But so far, we're still seeing increasing prevalence of HIV/AIDS in this population. So this is what marked the journey of Innovate AI Health Lab, a team that just met in this institution and decided to combine the expertise of computational modeling and artificial intelligence to develop a chatbot that would significantly, that will transmit information, provide the youth with a setup where they'll be comfortable to at least access information and help them deal with the sexual and reproductive health issues they face. I was posed there and in the lab, and this would, they will shed a few more light about what activities we do, and then we invite the first speaker. That the challenges faced by the healthcare industry are too complex, they are multifaceted, and they cannot be tackled in isolation. So this lab stands as a testament and a belief that true innovation flourishes when experts from diverse fields, whether it's AI researchers, computation modelers, psychologists, data scientists, this will flourish when we come together on a shared purpose. Thank you.
Good morning once again. Okay, on behalf of my team, we are 4 of us. Me, Dr. Consolata Gaki, Dr. Victoria Mukami, Dr. Mugo, and Marilyn, we work as a team. So Marilyn handles computational modeling, and for us, we handle artificial intelligence. Okay? So before we start, I would like to bring those who are not in our area to the pace so that we understand what artificial intelligence is. So now, what is artificial intelligence? Every day we hear AI, AI, AI. It is simply trying to transfer the human knowledge to machines. It is as simple as that. Simulating human knowledge to a computer system so that a computer can try to do exactly what the humans can do. And it happens every day because our TVC PAF said that yesterday she was thinking of a way to filter the document. That one, we will give you the solution. But we will be forced to bring into the team another expert in an area of deep learning, image processing, so that now we train our machine. When you input certificate, it can recognize or reject. Okay, so we got you. Now, what is the goal of AI? The goal of AI is simply to provide problem-solving solutions, to assist in decision-making, to assist us or the machines to understand natural language. We have so many times interacted with Siri. It's gone? Check. Now, the ability to recognize patterns. Sometimes we get annoyed when we are doing shopping online. There are some things that are giving us suggestions. That is AI. They are trying to look at the patterns of how you shop online or what you Google, and then the marketers use that strategy to advise you accordingly. Learning from experience, that one applies because we are able to say this and this has got wisdom. So now we try to train these machines so that they can have some wisdom. When you do something, it can remember when this was done, this was the possible solution. And also adapting to the situations that are coming. Please, we proceed to the next one. Now, there are several concepts that are under AI because AI is very broad. So there are some areas or some sections of AI, one of them being image processing that we are not focusing on. So what we focus on in our research is machine learning and natural language processing, okay? So that now we train the machines using data from the mathematical models so that we are able now to provide some solution to the real world. Because we are moving our research from labs, computers, to the real world. And for the natural language processing, now we narrow down to the ability for the machines to translate the language the sentiment analysis, where sometimes we feel that based on what the users are typing, they are not happy. Then we suggest something to motivate them. Then we have chatbots and language generation. So under natural language processing, we narrowed our research down again to chatbot. Okay? So we have mathematical modeling, AI, machine learning, natural language processing, then to chatbot. That was the best solution that we could give so that we address the issues among the youth and HIV/AIDS. Now, the question is, what is a chatbot? Because we are trying to assist the machines or train the machines to behave like human, it is simply a program that is able to converse just the way humans do. Are we together? We are not? Yes? No. Okay, now, why did we decide to use the chatbot? Because we felt that we needed to provide the youth with right information on matters HIV. The next thing was the ability for the chatbot to provide continuous engagement. A conversation goes and goes, and it can even suggest what we should talk about next because of the intelligence that is in that machine. The other thing is the safe space for questions. Sometimes youth tend not to ask questions, especially when it comes to these matters HIV, but it will be very easy for them to ask a machine a question and get a relevant answer. The other one is anonymous access to resources. We felt that these young people may be scared of going to the clinics that are near our homes. So now what should we do? When the intelligence of this chatbot identifies that you need help, we can guide you accordingly to where you can go in Embu town, where no one knows you, and you get help. That is another reason why we chose that. Language and cultural sensitivity. When we were coming up with this project, we made sure that in the process of natural language processing, we incorporate the concept of shame, the slang that is used for the youth, so that they can be able to accept this technology. Now, where does computational modeling, AI, and health meet? This is multidisciplinary research that we are using data analysis. Definitely, we are guided by data, and so much has been said about the data and how it is complex. Yes, we understand how complex data can be, especially biological data. I worked on it and it was almost killing me. It is very complicated. Then the predictive modeling, when Dr. Rono gets the output from our research or from our chatbot, from after we do the data collection, she'll be able to predict what can happen, and then we will come and tell her, this is the solution we can give. So this research is not ending soon. And then we are able to provide the personalized interventions. I've explained when I was discussing how we can guide the young people, and also the ability to have continuous monitoring. We are having this output, we give it to Rono, she gives us some output, and we have continuous research that is ongoing. Now, how did Rono get to give us information so that we make a decision on who to target and how to do it? She did some epidemiological modeling using, by simulating a model that was trying to understand the spread of HIV/AIDS in Kenya. At that moment, she used secondary data, the data that is already existing, and the factors that she was considering was demographics, sexual behavior, and the transmission rate among the youth and adults. That is how we were able to narrow down our target group to the youth because of our output. So we identified the target population, and in that way we tailored our chatbot to provide a messaging functionality to this group that is expected to benefit from our output. The beauty about our project is that this project is feeding another project. Okay, this project is supplementing another project. So we get this information, we collect data, we use it to address another problem in another project, and that project is called, we move to the next slide, please. The next project is called HASH, that is part of this, and the same team that will be presented by Dr. Victoria. Thank you very much for listening.
I'll just briefly explain where Dr. Ronos left off. She spoke about, she has a model, then what? So you have to implement, you have to go to the field, you have to involve the youth. So that's where we came in, and what you can see is the HASH project, and essentially the HASH project is implementation of what we got from Dr. Ronos' project into this particular one. And so it started off last year. It's targeting the youth within 2 counties, Embu and Murang'a counties. And by youth, we also are including adolescents. So in this point, we have adolescents aged 14 to 19, typical age for high schoolers. And as well as youth, we targeted university students, so the typical age is anywhere from 19 to 24. They may be a bit older or a bit younger, but it's around that age. 2 counties, Embu County, of course, because University of Embu is in Embu. And then we also targeted Murang'a County. We're trying to go more with a rural setting than urban. Lots of research has been done in a lot of slum areas, in urban areas, so we're trying to get some rural areas. We worked, and we are still in the process of working with 4 secondary day schools within Embu County and an additional 4 secondary day schools, including even a school that is directly opposite the university. So we are working with the local children from this county and from Murang'a County. And then we're working with, of course, the University of Embu and Murang'a University. And we already had some stakeholder meetings. And during the stakeholder meetings, we had Ministry of Health officials from both counties represented. We had the head of HIV included in the stakeholder workshops. We had counselors, and these are secondary school counselors, the university counselors. We had the county representatives for health services, also within these particular stakeholder meetings. And so how does HASH project come together with AI? So when you think about the data that we collected from the model, the first thing is we came up with a solution, which Dr. Gaki already spoke about, the chatbot. In our case, we call it the Beshte chatbot, so which is a HIV solution that combines what information we got from the students. We actually went to the field, spoke to these high school students, spoke to the university students, found out what their problems are. What we thought were their problems are apparently, I want to say maybe 60%. They were trying to fill in for the 40%. And using this, the Beshte chatbot will be able to communicate using slang and a mixture of English and Swahili. And then with that, the solution basically incorporates data as the first thing, which is a lot of qualitative data from focus groups. There was a question asked on day 1 by the participants of the workshop: where do you get data from? You actually get it from the field. Our data at the moment is, because we've done, I want to say our focus groups just with the students are about, I think about 12 of them. We have 4 stakeholder focus groups as well. I would believe we have about almost 300 pages worth of qualitative data That's a lot of information to work with once it was transcribed. So we have that data. This data will get analyzed, which is the stage we are in. So we pick these 300 pages, do an analysis, and come up with questions and answers. So these questions and answers are what will be fed to the chatbot, and will basically train the chatbot. Then these question and answer pairs will be customized to Sheng. That's the stage we are in. And we're currently targeting approximately 2,000 questions. They could get to more than that. It might end up being double that size. But then these questions will be used to train the chatbot, and then it will be implemented. So early next year, we'll be doing implementations within those secondary schools as well as the universities that I've mentioned. And so what is the future of AI, computational modeling, and HIV and AIDS? So we're just focusing for now on HIV and AIDS. We are basically offered one solution, chatbots. But then you've got things like in HIV, some of the things that we learned, like it was said, I'm the health informatics researcher. We learned about PEP. I don't know whether people know about PEP and PrEP and ARVs. Probably only know about ARVs. But if you go Google, you'll see the three are different. And you've got things like you have to drink them at the same time. So AI could be used for reminders. It could be used to check, is this person really taking their meds? If you have things like clinical trials, you could easily monitor using artificial intelligence. So some of the other things would be to offer information, reminders, medication reminders. We have emotional support through the use of chatbots. And then finally, of course, linking to a medical professional. So we're hoping we'll get to a place where Kenya and perhaps even Africa as a whole, we really embrace AI. All right, so thank you. That's our presentation. I'll take it back to Dr. Rono. We're meant to invite the other presenters, but this is just an overview of what the Innovate AI Lab has been doing. Thank you.
And to Anna and her team, it was a bit of a short notice, but we are grateful that you got time. So,
that's a bad omen.
Good morning, esteemed guests. Good morning, the faculty members and the students. We're all also very excited to be here. We're not taking for granted that there's so many people that want to learn from the computational biologist a little bit about our story on tomatoes and modeling and mathematics. So our presentation was seen here for a second. Hopefully it will come.
Has everything gone twice?
Okay. So as I said, computational biologist, I already prepared that probably most of the people know what a biologist is. And we have some sort of expectations what a biologist do and how they contribute to the society. Either working with the microscope or in a lab performing wet lab experiments. But what does a computational biologist do? Well, the most important message is to convey that today biology is foremost an information science.
So we've heard already twice now today that we live in a world with essentially too much data, really to really grasp it. So the DVC has said this, and Dr. Mulko has said this. So the important bit being for biology, this hasn't always been the case, right? We do all remember a time, or maybe not remember, but we can think back to a time where this wasn't the case. And it's important to see historically where this has come from. So back in the last century, we had this huge discovery of DNA. And then people really started wondering, okay, this is a paradigm shift again about how we think about ourselves, right? So the interest grew, and there was massive public funding for the Human Genome Project, for example, which led to massive increasements in the technologies that we use, in the data that was generated, and also in the computational methods that were available to us then. So this is how, at least from the biological side, this has actually been going forward. So most importantly for our cases now, for the work that we are doing, are omics data. So we not only have genes that have been sequenced, but also transcripts, metabolomics, so the actual metabolite levels in the cell, and many, many other sources of data. So as has been correctly said before, The problem nowadays is to integrate all this data, not to get it, but to actually make sense of it, right? Because it vastly outperforms the scale of what we can actually think about. And one very, very great tool to do this are mathematical models. In particular, in this case, for this particular problem that we're talking about, we're working with genome scale models. So models that have been using gene sequences that have been collected for a certain organism to build a metabolic model, so a giant metabolic model, that we can then improve by using additional data sources, like, for example, the transcriptome data or the metabolome data. So we know what has to be produced and what is actually produced in the cell. And if we incorporate all of that, we get a giant model that thankfully can still be calculated relatively easily with linear programming. So this is something that we can still very easily solve. So what about all of this now and tomatoes? Because this talk is about tomatoes.
That's a good question. So let me show you this beautiful image, microscopic image, of certain structures. And this is a question to you. Is there anyone here brave enough to guess what am I showing to you? Any idea? Any brave guess will do. Oh, thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Fungi is the first thing that we've heard.
I think here pretty much looks like a fungi.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not the correct answer. What I'm showing to you here are the microscopic images of the very diverse structures that are present on the surface of almost every third sessile plant that we have outside. And I guarantee you that you've all seen them, but not in such a microscopic scale. So why do plants have them? Mostly for the protection. So for example, here, this spiky thingy, you can find on the Arabidopsis thaliana, which is the favorite model organism that biologists are using over the world in their labs. In here, on the other hand, you have the structure that can be found on the hops. And here, finally, you can have a structure that can be found on tomatoes. But you can still ask me the question, where? We've never seen that. Yes, you did. They are present mostly on the surface of leaves or the stems. Those are those tiny hairy structures, and they're called glandular trichomes. And we're interested in glandular trichomes because they produce a huge variety of compounds. And the title of our talk was Extra Energy, Extra Compounds. So, since they're present in so many different plants, and they're producing interesting compounds, many people in our field started to refer to those glandular trichomes as metabolic cell factories. Because they're producing molecules that can be applied and used in the, not yet, in the cosmetics industry, in a medical industry, as a natural antibacterial repellent, and also in brewery. And I already heard that there is a brewery here around. So the bitter taste of the beer comes from the molecules produced by the glandular trichomes of hops. So I told you about those tiny structures. They're quite small, and without these microscopic images, you probably would never notice them. Yet we have found out that inside of those structures, there is a chloroplast. And in case you don't know why that might be exciting, it's because the chloroplast is the place where the photosynthesis happens. So the process, the only biochemical process that we know that naturally occurs, that can take light energy and convert it into the extra biochemical energy. So we start to wonder, why such a tiny structure on the top of the hairy structure would invest over the evolution on hosting the whole protein system in order to produce extra energy. And we thought that there's no better way of tackling that question than creating models to test different hypotheses.
Okay, so we were particularly interested in a chemical class called terpenes. which is a huge variety of actual useful compounds that I think you're going to talk later about a bit more. And there are two main pathways in those photosynthetic glandular trichomes, how they can be produced. So in general, in contrast to a leaf, which produces its own sugar, the sugar is imported into the trichome. So we get a sucrose influx, for those who want to have the exact name, into the trichome. And then we have essentially two choices. Either we burn some of that sucrose to get extra energy to build those terpenes, and then we get mostly sesquiterpenes. So this is this lower pathway here. And the other chance that we get in those photosynthetic glandular trichomes only is that we actually use the energy from the sunlight to then produce those terpenes more efficiently. So we don't have to burn this extra sucrose here. So our hypothesis was, if we have those photosynthetic glandular trichomes, then we should see more monoterpenes if we actually increase the light in there, right? Okay, so we said that we're going to build a model here. And what we've done is a genome scale reconstruction. This means we had genetic data on the tomatoes available from multiple databases, and then we mapped this with a tool that we built ourselves in a programming language called Python.
And just as a side note, Python is the programming language that we're teaching now the group during the hackathon that is organized by Dr. Rono.
Exactly. So we had all those reactions that we knew were there from either the genome or from transcriptomics data that experimentally was measured. And then we also found certain metabolites that were consistently in those trichomes that we needed, that we knew if we can actually measure them, they should be there. But the thing was, with the network that we initially built, those could not be produced. So we actually had to fill in certain gaps in our knowledge, and there's a tool, again in Python, called Mineko, that we can use to exactly do this step. So we have an incomplete network, a network that is missing essential reactions, and then we fill in those essential reactions until we can actually produce all of them. And with this final model now that could do all those things, we actually did some experiments, some predictions. So as I said before, we have a constant influx of sucrose. This is what we assume, and this is what we're not changing, right? So we're getting carbons inside of this cell. What we then simulated was that if we increase the light that this cell becomes with the same amount of sugar that we're getting in, the terpenoid synthesis rate goes actually up. So this is a good reminder again that what we said before, this was our hypothesis in the last place, that here some of those carbons need to be burned in order to get energy, while here, in this case, we don't need to burn those carbons, right? We get this energy for free. And you see this with another readout of essentially the same experiment, so increased light, where in the beginning, the cell would take up oxygen, and then after this certain point here, after a certain amount of light, the cell actually releases oxygen. So what we know from the metabolism is that we're switching from reactions that consume energy to reactions that produce energy in the cell. And as every computational model that you're ever going to build, of course, our model also needed to be verified, right? This is a very important step. So we teamed up with some people from Germany as well, from the Leibniz Institute, to do metabolomics for us, to see in the leaf, so not in a leaf, in trichomes grown either in low light or high light conditions, and then, because we wanted to be sure that this is not an artifact of any growth stage, also in 3 different growth stages. This is probably a bit hard to see here, but on the top graph here, we have the monoterpenes, so the ones with the pathway where you can actually get the extra energy. And this yellow bar here is the high light condition, this gray bar is the low light condition, the control condition. And what we can see that for small and medium leaves, we actually get a significant increase in those monoterpenes if we grow the plants in high light. For the sesquiterpenes, so the pathway that utilized the burning of some of the carbons itself, we actually get no significant change in any of the cases, right? So this doesn't change, but we do get more monoterpenes. So to summarize those research findings so far, we predicted that an increase in light intensity would result in a shift from energy-consuming to energy-producing reactions. And we were able to simulate that, to test our hypothesis, thanks to the development of a Python-based data integration platform, of a model that we could build ourselves. And then later on, our predictions were verified by our experimental partners. By the way, one thing I didn't say so far, that package that we use to do this reconstruction is available for free. So all of you can use this, and especially all of the students who have now already learned some Python can directly use this to do their own experiments.
Okay, and this type of the research we call a basic research because it gives us a new fundamental knowledge about very basic processes. And what is the relevance of such a research for us in the applied world? I thought I'm going to give you another very tangible example of another organism where glandular trichomes also are playing the role. So what you see here is a sweet wormwood, Artemisia annua, very important plant in context of treating malaria. In 1970, the Nobel Prize has been awarded to first continental Chinese female scientist, Yu Tu, for discovering that this plant can produce in the glandular trichomes a compound that has antimalarial properties. In 2004, the WHO recommended that this compound-based therapies will be the standard therapy for uncomplicated malaria. What it has done, over the 10 years, there was almost 4 times higher demand for artemisinin than before. So people started to search for alternative methods of getting that compound. And in 2003, there was the first publication that suggested we can probably synthesize or the precursor in the lab. And they published it. 2 years later, they started the developmental phase. The demand for the artemisinin was growing, so giant biopharmaceutical companies like Sanofi joined the partnership, built special factories to synthesize this compound inside of the E. coli, got in 2013 the agreement that they can sell it and produce it on a multi-ton scale, yet 2 years later they closed their facility in Italy where they were producing those compounds. And why is that? Anyone has a suggestion? It's because in the meantime, the farmers optimized the growth of the natural plant, which led to the drop of the prices of the naturally produced artemisinin. And can I get the numbers, please? From the data from 2016, the naturally derived chemical was sold for around $250 per kilogram, which was already almost twice lower than the no profit, no loss margin of the Sanofi. And that was a very humble example and a reminder that yes, synthetic biology, yes, biotechnology, but still fundamental research, because if we don't know everything about a plant and pathways yet, we probably are not using yet natural methods to really gain the highest yields. So why it's not working for me? So through that research, the data-driven project, we could assemble a model with which we could first test a hypothesis that was not possible to be tested in the field. We could not shut down the sucrose transport from the leaves, but we could shut it in a computer. We just needed a proper representation of all the pathways inside. We could connect through the software that has been developed by Marvin and collaborators to incorporate a huge amount of data on different levels, from genome, transcriptome, and metabolome. We could provide an explanation that there is a relevance of this chloroplast being inside and the photosynthesis being active, and now we can modulate the production of specific terpenoids with use of light. And we go now even a step further to see if we can modulate it with the use of different light colors, and not only intensity. And with that, I would like to thank our funding bodies, our universities, and you for inviting us here and being such a great host. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Vice Chancellor, I will repeat. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning once again. Yeah. So it's for me, it's a signature greeting that I always remember Kenyans with, and I'm really grateful to be here. Okay, so we shift from biologists, we go to mathematicians. We have mathematicians in the room. Yeah, and applied mathematicians. Yeah. I hope I inspire somebody to become a mathematician. So this is more of my story, but more of a charge also, because of where I came from and where I'm heading, and where I'm being attracted to. There are forces that I can't resist. So that's why I say it's embracing the paradigm shift. Then in that manner we start unlocking new boundaries that were closed before us. So I don't know if I know how to use this. There are no signs. Okay. So this is where I started. In fact, I started as a pure mathematician, doing some abstract algebra, some number theory, some graph theories, and then I shifted to mathematical modeling of infectious diseases. And what you see here is actually my first publication. PhD, I was working on HIV modeling within the host. And here I was designing an n-dimensional model, a generalized model. And it was, I didn't put everything, I just showed you some pictures here. The other name here, that was my advisor, Professor Edward Lungu. So,
data visualization company. So I dropped a bit the biological aspect of my work, and I started working on the digital, on data. And especially, I started to work on the interface between the digital and the human. So how can we present the data to others? How can we build an interface of a digital tool that other people can use? So basically, so when you have a digital tool, we scientists are mostly focused on the computer aspect, the computation aspect, the technological aspect, and it's one of the key parts of the tool. But on the other side, on the other side there is us. On the other side of the interface there is us. There is us human. Where is that one? Yeah, here. So there is us human on the other side of the interface. And in between, there is the interface. So, which generally is the screen of our computer, is the screen of our phone. And here, at the interface, a lot of things happen, and a lot of things can go right or wrong. And working at the interface of digital tools is where I learned how collaboration is important, how much collaboration is important, and collaboration like beyond what we expect. So when I was working in the building interface for digital tools, I was working with designer, and if you're a scientist, and you have to work with someone that has such a different background, you both speak the same language. Maybe you speak in English or in Italian for me because I'm from Italy. But it's really like you talk a different language. It's really hard to let's say, to communicate with people with other background. They were telling to me that it's like speaking another language, but I didn't realize it until I tried it. But still collaboration is important. And so to build digital tools, I had to collaborate with designer, but there was another step that really, really helped to learn how to build digital tools that other people can use. And it's when I started collaborating also with people from the humanities field. So from ethnography, from anthropology, because at that point we could really have tools, we could really have methods to interact with the other side of the interface, the human side. We learn how to interview them, how to figure out what is the need of someone that stands at the other side of the interface, which eventually it's us. So, it's really, really great that this university is investing in AI. AI is the pinnacle of digital technology. It's when digital technology really start to look a bit like us, start to look a bit like human. And it's funny because the word artificial intelligence has been around for a while, and still we struggle to define what AI is. Is it when we use deep learning? Is it when machine, is artificial intelligence what machines yet cannot do? And then when we learn to train a machine to do something new, then it becomes a technology that is available. Or is it when computer start to do something that we don't even understand how they do it, because it gets so complicated and so similar to our human intelligence that we can program to do this. We can achieve great results and very useful tools, but we don't understand how the machine achieve these specific results. So these are great questions in artificial intelligence. But the fact is that artificial intelligence is growing very fast. And the tools of artificial intelligence, they can do now what 10 years ago wasn't even imaginable. So right now I have in my pocket a phone that can recognize objects in a photo. And 10 years ago, we couldn't even imagine that a supercomputer could do that. So AI is growing, and AI is the digital part. But still, digital tools can have to interact with us. And here is when you have non-technological challenges to digital tools. It's because eventually artificial intelligence is a tool. So it's like, to use a metaphor from medicine, a tool, when you develop a medicine, like the basic tool is the molecule that kills the pathogen when you try it in a model organism. And this is the basis of our medicine. So if we don't have this molecule, we don't have our medicine, we don't have our medical system. But still, to make it a usable tool, that molecule have to work in vivo, have to work on us human, and it has to be produced and distributed at a reasonable price, and so it has to be accessible. And this is a usable tool, but still, a medicine that works doesn't mean that it's going to be useful, because if it is not embedded in a healthcare system that the citizen trusts and that can provide both prevention for the illness and let's say a cure, so a medicine when then it's needed when prevention has failed. So if we don't have this system, then we don't have a useful solution yet. So we start from a tool, and you have many steps to build a useful solution. A useful solution must be embedded in society. And this is when collaboration becomes fundamental. And so I think it's really amazing that this university is starting to build AI tools. AI tools are amazing digital tools. And collaboration is the key to build useful one. And you will need to collaborate with much more than you expect. You will have to collaborate with designers, and you will have to collaborate with people from the humanities, from anthropology, that can understand how a tool interacts with society to achieve amazing results. And I'm sure you will. So thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
As Dr. Marilyn has said, I'm the Director of Programs at the Mawazo Institute. But we're not just a funder, we do many things. So I just wanted to correct that caveat. And also, just to start off the presentation with, next slide please. So Mawazo means ideas or thoughts in Kiswahili, and that is how the Mawazo Institute was first started. But before I even go into Mawazo, I just want to give a very brief overview of who I am and how I ended up at Mawazo. So before I came to Mawazo, I'll work my way backwards. Before I came to Mawazo, I was a lecturer at the Technical University of Kenya for about 7 years. And before that, I worked in market research across the continent. I even lived in Nigeria for some months. And it was full-on drama in Nigeria. I realized what we see in their movies is actually how they behave in real life. Like it was just full-on drama. Yes. And before that, I was an academic researcher as I did my PhD. So I've done the whole gamut of research. And now I find myself working with researchers, specifically women researchers. So at the Mawazo Institute, and the Technical University of Kenya has been very gracious to give me a sabbatical to allow me to do this work. So I'm still supervising students and doing all that academic work as well. So at Mawazo Institute was founded by Dr. Rose Mutiso and Rachel Strom. And ideally, next slide please. So we fulfill our mandate through 2 programs. That's the fellowship program and the Voices program. So the fellowship program, I use this, okay. And I'm also a social scientist. I just wanted to also place that as a caveat because I know I'm in the presence of mathematicians, biologists, etc., etc. I'm a social scientist, so if you hear me using a lot of social science language, don't worry about it. We are all now trying to integrate the languages that we speak because we are here to talk about interdisciplinary collaboration and research. So we do our work through 2 programs. That's the fellowship program and the Voices program. Of interest to you will be the fellowship program because that is how we bring in people into Mawazo Institute. So next slide, please. I don't have one. Just go back to next slide after that. So for the fellowship program, we are on the 3rd cohort, which is the 2023 Mawazo Fellows. When we first started, we started with the first cohort of PhD scholars. There were 10, and they were all from Kenya. Dr. Marilyn, you were in that cohort. Yes, she was in that cohort. Received training and some funding to do their path to PhD. The second cohort were called the MLEX Fellows because we expanded into a Mawazo Learning Exchange platform. Because this was during COVID and everything went online, including all the training that we offer our fellows. Before that, it was very physical. So the first cohort of 10 were all from Kenya. Second cohort, because it was online, we expanded to the Eastern African region. We had fellows from Ethiopia, from Uganda, from Tanzania, etc., and Rwanda. And now we are on the 3rd cohort of 40 fellows from all over the continent. They represent 16 countries across the continent. In the fellowship program, we bring in fellows, we give them some funding for path to PhD, activities that is research, and we also give them some non-academic training that they will not get in the university space. We're talking about policy engagement, public engagement, and those kinds of areas that actually help them now transition into the second program, which we call the Mawazo Voices, if you go back to the previous slide. So the Mawazo Voices program is how we now amplify the work of our fellows and those within our ecosystem. And that is through public engagement, policy engagement. We have podcasts, we have a lot of strategic partnerships with everybody. And that is how, as I said, we are not just a funder, we are also moving into the space of doing our own homegrown research, within the organization. We are also going into the direction of being a think and do tank so that we are more relevant to our fellows and beneficiaries within the ecosystem. Why are we doing that? Because in the last round for the 2023 fellows, 2,222, actually remember the number, 2,222 women actually went into our platform to apply. And out of those, we had 927 applications, and we could only give 40. And we had the same problem you had from the 222 to the 927, where we had people uploading empty. So I will be reaching out to our AI expert and deep learning, because we had that challenge of all these PDFs, they come in and you're like, there's nothing in this PDF or a photograph or something like that. So we have the same problems, and I'm happy because we are talking about these problems and getting solutions to them as we continue to speak. Next slide after that one. Yes. So I'm here to talk about how do we get funding from the funder to the fellow or the beneficiary or the person conducting research or the people conducting research. And our eligibility criteria and selection criteria are more or less the same. You have to identify as a woman, and the next two slides will tell you why for now we are focusing on women. You have to be a citizen of an African country, citizen of an African country, that's it. You have to have a good command of written and spoken English. That was a criteria, and that's why it's not in bold. We don't necessarily just look at the language. For this cohort, it was important because our learning exchange is still in English. We have plans to expand our learning exchange into different languages. But before we do that, because we were only confined to the English language, we had that criteria number 3. Be enrolled for PhD in an accredited university at an African country. Again, we don't care if your university in the rankings is number 1,000 out of 1,001. We just need for it to be accredited. So we just need you to be in an accredited university. Have completed your coursework, and where applicable, depending on the discipline, have defended your proposal. That was very important for us because once you've gone through that stage, you already have your title, you have your literature review and your questions and your methodology, and you've gone through the process of having that vetted by a panel of experts and scholars and academics. It's very difficult to say, oh, now I want to change, I want now to go back and do something else. By that stage, you are fully committed to the process. And so we did not want people who will come and change their minds and say, I think I want to change, I think I want to change this. You're already committed, you have been vetted by your accredited university, and that's what we wanted. Then criteria number 6 is now where the rubber begins to hit the road. Demonstrate that your PhD research is related to an African development goal and is relevant to a global, regional, national, sub-national, we even went to sub-county level, policy priority. Why is this important? I'll come to that question. Demonstrate that you have a big idea to transform Africa through your research. Now, big idea is not about the size of your idea. It's just about the boldness. And I'll also come to that because that's one of the key questions I was asked to answer at this public lecture. And then you demonstrate your potential for leadership, both within and outside academia. We don't want to just help people or scholars who, as we've heard from the professor, you've just done your thesis and then it looks nice, you've passed your thesis, you've written your papers, you've published, you've been promoted, and then what? What are we doing with all this knowledge? There are so many of us with PhDs now, both women and men, in Kenya. Are we solving our problems? One day at a time, but are we really, if you look at the proportion of people with those PhDs and the proportion of the problems, are we pulling our weight as the people with the knowledge? Perhaps we need to, to think about that. So we don't want that to be the end goal. How are we relevant to our societies, to our communities? And that's a key question because we have been accused in the academy of hiding in the ivory tower and only coming out when you want data. You go and look for people, we call them respondents, or research participants, if you want to be very politically correct and to see that you have flattened the researcher relationship and dynamic. But then once you collect that data, what do? We retreat back to conferences and spaces like this, we pontificate, we theorize, and then what? So we wanted, or we are asking our fellows, and this might be an unfair ask, but we are now in 2023. How do we say in Kiswahili? Masani machache, na nini ndio nini? Absolutely. So we have reached a place where we can, yes, we can no longer afford to continue with that trajectory. Maybe that was how it was in the past, but we have to now start thinking about how our research is impacting our communities. It cannot just be for ourselves to get nice PhDs and papers and promotions and positions, etc. It has to be more than that. So the ones in bold were what we were focusing in terms of selection criteria. Remember, 2,222 applicants, out of that 927 viable. By viable, I mean they have uploaded all their degrees, their defense the proposals, their defense, and everything. So that is what we are looking at. Now, why women? Next slide. Why women? Next slide. I'll come back to this one later. African women researchers in numbers. 53, if you go to just in general across the continent, 53% of those in bachelor's and master's are women. But as you keep going up the ladder, the number keeps reducing. 43% doing PhD, doing, not completing. That's a different conversation as well. Doing, have registered for PhDs, 43%. 24% are permanent staff of flagship universities. So you can see from 43 to 24, that means a high number of them are not completing. Actually, that's the reason. A high number of them are not completing, and there are reasons why. Or are completing and are unable to now become, the next step into the academic space. 24% are permanent staff of flagship universities. This is across the continent. There was something that was going around on WhatsApp the other day, that if you look at the number of women in Kenyan universities, and you found that in some faculties there was 1 woman and 47 men, and I was like, are these numbers correct? I'm still yet to verify, but that is how it looks like. 10% are members of national science academies, 2.5% on the continent are vice chancellors. And we have so many universities, thousands I think, across the continent. Only 2.5 get to the level of VC. And so then it means there's a gap, especially between enrolling for the PhD and completing the PhD and getting into the academy. There's a huge gap. That's the gap we're trying to address. We have fallen far behind, and if you go back to the previous slide, even in terms of the research ecosystem, the GDP spent on research, 2.13 of the global average, 0.15% is the sub-Saharan average. And of the 100% of global research, and by global research I mean research being done across the world, just research in general, less than 1% is being done on the African continent. And there's a lot of research that is going on, but it composes less than 1%. It's very low. So you can imagine of that 1%, how many is being done by women? Again, the number continues going down. So this is the gap we are trying to resolve. At some point, will we perhaps think of funding men? Maybe. Once we begin to, if these numbers improve, we can have that conversation. Next slide, please. So I was asked a question about interdisciplinary communication. In terms of, you've sent your application, we've looked at it. Do we consider interdisciplinarity as one of the key things and communication as being one of the key things? These are just very general tips. Interdisciplinary communication, especially because once we bring in our fellows, we are now beginning to think about how do we amplify the research. We also find that the reason why that 1% figure exists is that because research from the continent is in some cases ignored. It's ignored because we don't know that the research is happening. We don't know that you're there. We are not aware. We have no place where we can say, and I'll give this as an example to Daktari. We of the 927 applicants, over 30% were actually in AI. And we really struggled to find people to review those applications because we don't review them in-house. I'll find a Kenyan and I'll say, I want this Kenyan and I want the other one and I also want Marilyn and I want... So what we do is that we reach out to a pool of experts across the continent and we tell them, please come onto the platform. This is in your area of interest, it's in your area of expertise. And we have about 2 to 3 reviewers per applicant, just to make sure that at the end of that process, we are having a very balanced review in terms of how they have been ranked. And that is how now we begin to cut down the numbers. We struggled to find people in AI. We really struggled. We said, where are they? Who do we call? Who do we ask? So it was very difficult. So the few people we had in AI had to review a lot of the applications, yes. And again, I'm very glad that I'm in this forum because some of these challenges and problems are being solved in real time. And so we focus on the story. What is this story? Is it a compelling story? At the end of the day, everything we do is just about storytelling. If I've listened to all the presentations and all I've heard are stories. This is where I started, this is what we found as the problem, this is how we decided to solve it, and eventually this is how we did it. That's a story. And it's a compelling story because you can see where it started. It started from here, then there was a problem, then, and then we found a solution, or we are working towards a solution. That is the simple act of storytelling. I said I'm a social scientist, I'm also a published writer in different journals, in Lolwe, etc. And a good story is as simple as that. It has a beginning, it has a middle where there was a crisis, a problem, and then it had an ending, or at least the promise of an ending if there's going to be a sequel. And for us, we operate on sequels. Our work is never necessarily complete. You can't say that this is the end because there's always going to be another problem. So it's about the story. Is your story compelling? Is it authentic? Is it simple? And is it easy to understand? And I say this because, especially for scientists, not social scientists, scientists, the biologists, and tend to speak in jargon, and it's like seeing the mathematical formulas on the page, and you're like, oh my God, I do not understand. I'm just seeing figures and gamma and beta and all those things on the screen. I have no idea what they're saying. So is it simple? Can you tell your story to people that are not of your specialty and they understand what you're saying? How is your story connected to other disciplines? Is your story connected to other disciplines? And if so, how is it connected to these other disciplines? You have said, Prof, that it's time for us to start thinking outside our disciplines because we've really been sitting in our disciplines, and that comes down to point number 3. Our disciplines have even become our identities. I am a biologist, I'm a mathematician, I am, what else? I'm an engineer, I'm an architect, I'm a lawyer. And sometimes we are called to go outside the confines and the comforts of these identities and start thinking outside these identities. And I'll come back to that just now in terms of looking at that storytelling. Next 2 slides, the second slide after this one. So I was also asked about advice for applicants in the common pitfalls, and I wanted us to focus on this. So the first one is your title. Please note I'm saying title. I'm not saying your project. I'm not saying your focus. I'm saying your title. Avoid effects of and influence of in your titles. Especially if your project is one that wants to talk about an innovative project, an innovative design, etc. Please avoid those. We found a lot of those in our applications. A high percentage of those were from Kenya. We love to look at influence of effects of COVID on health, effects of COVID on attendance in school, effect of something on something. Please, I'm not saying don't look at what is affecting something and influencing something. You can do that somewhere inside your work, but do not put it in your title. Our reviewers, if they see things like that, they just know there is very little innovation to be found there. So if you can avoid it, once you say influence off, remove that influence off and then look at everything else that is over here and try and play around with that. And you give us a proper story. What is the story? What are you saying? If we say that you want to look at the effect of COVID on attendance of school, what exactly are you what is the story you're looking for? That is the story we want to see in the title. Don't give us the effects. Please, 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 I will repeat myself, do not. If you can avoid it, avoid it. Now, your work must be bold. Many Kenyans especially, and I'm saying many Kenyans because the majority of us are Kenyans, we are very meek, we are like banks. We're very risk averse. We want to sound nice, we want to sound polite, we want to sound laid back. And innovation is about disrupting the status quo, isn't it? Many of the projects that were awarded, and some Kenyans were awarded, and even those ones for Kenyans that were awarded, were very bold projects. There's someone who is trying to use artificial intelligence in her country, to connect the national power grid because it is not able to reach the rural area. She wants to use artificial intelligence to harness solar power into the national electric grid in her country. That's bold. That's bold. There's somebody else who wants to make it cheaper and more accessible for women to test for cancer of the cervix through a urine test. That's bold. It's simple, but it's bold because it's not being done. And we know that cancer of the cervix is the #1 killer of women on the continent of Africa. And the reason why it's killing women is because they cannot afford the current ways that we are testing for cancer of the cervix. That's through the pap smear. They are invasive, they are inaccessible, they are expensive. That's why women are dying. That's the #1 killer. And if you go to Western, the #1 killer is throat cancer because they drink very hot tea, apparently. But yes, the tea is very hot. They like to say they have an intercooler, but the tea is very hot, so they're getting a lot of throat cancer. But the #1 killer for women is cancer of the cervix. So these are bold projects. They are bold. There's somebody else who wanted to use gaming language, a gamer wanted to use gaming, skills to transfer them into the classroom to help children who have autism or on the autism spectrum. Because they are very good at games, but it becomes difficult for them to concentrate in the conventional way that people who are not on the spectrum can concentrate. That's bold. It's bold and it's simple and it's compelling. So these are the kinds of things. It's about disrupting the status quo. It's not just saying, okay, I'm going to look around and see it's being bold. Be bold, be out there. And I'll tell you this, and this might, I'm not saying this to condemn the faculty who are here. Many of the women who won these awards with these projects, some of their supervisors discouraged them and told them, this project is unworkable, this project is silly, this project is stupid, unfortunately. And then this would then call for us as faculty, people who are still supervising students, to also try and think outside the box with your student, instead of discouraging them and telling them, this one cannot work. It just could work. It could work, right? So make sure that your work is bold. Think outside the box. I know that sounds like it's a cliche. Think outside the box. Think out there. You are the one who is sitting where the problem is, because research is about solving a problem. That's why we have a statement of the problem in your chapter 1. So think about the problem. You are sitting with a problem. You are going to solve a problem. Now, your proposal is yours. That's number 3. You must own it. It's your proposal. Many people, you get the feeling, even when you're questioning them and asking them, how did you arrive at this? You get the feeling they're very detached from their projects. You ask them, who are you reading? You're looking at the reading list. I'm not seeing, this is a very small reading list. Who are you reading in your field? They're very laid back. They don't want to do a lot of the groundwork in the reading. This is your project. We've heard that the first woman was it the first woman or the first Chinese woman? The first Chinese woman to win the Nobel Prize for Physics, or was it in medicine? Very simple project, but very compelling. This is the first person to discover that that plant, the name of the plant was? Artemisia, had anti-malarial. It's so simple, but then she won a Nobel Prize for that. Very simple. It's simple, but she owned it, and so you must own your project. And here I'm speaking to the postgraduate students. You must own your project. Owning your project means you must be willing to get your hands dirty, you must be willing to read, you must be willing to have sleepless nights sometimes. You must be willing to go the extra mile. You have to. And if you're going the extra mile, but then your project, your innovation is one that is going to have an impact, is it not worth it? So you must be willing to go there. Then we can no longer afford work that is work for its own sake. Oh, I'm just doing an effect study, I'm just looking at the effect of the new regime on CBC. Why? We can no longer do that. Unfortunately, we are in a situation where we are ravaged by so many challenges, very many challenges. We are not food secure, we are not water secure, we have climate change on our heels, we have a lot of turmoil in terms of even peace. There are places in the country where people cannot sleep in their houses. We have people in this country who are very poor, they cannot afford to eat, they don't have places to live in. We have very many challenges. And those challenges are our challenges to solve. If we don't solve these problems, and that's why part of my title talks about homegrown challenges. If we don't start to solve our own problems, other people will continue to solve our problems for us. But whose agenda will they be fulfilling? Our agenda or their own agenda? So these are questions that we have. We have to start thinking about solving problems. Solving problems doesn't mean you create the cure for cancer right now. It could mean starting small, depending on your area of study and your discipline. It could mean starting small, then someone else builds on it. And innovative. Are your proposed solutions generic? Are they relevant, timely, specific, and impactful? Are they impactful in the long term? And that brings me to the next slide. Next slide was interdisciplinary collaboration in the future via data-driven approaches. First is interdisciplinarity. We've all spoken about it. Our challenges are interdisciplinary in nature, so we can no longer afford to sit in our disciplinary cocoons. It's no longer feasible. Our problems, if we say one of the problems we are facing is we are food insecure, that is not a problem only for agriculture to solve. This is a problem for everybody to solve, the sociologists. Why are we not doing this? Why, if we did this in the past, why are we no longer doing it? That's a problem for a cultural expert to solve. That's a problem for somebody who is well-versed in geology to solve, for example. Like, for example, there's a question that is being asked. Why are the waters of Lake Bogoria are rising and the hot springs are disappearing? I see journalists going there every other month, and they say, scientists are yet to find a solution. The scientists are here. Why are the waters rising? What's the problem? This is a problem for climate experts. This is a problem for geologists. It's everybody's. It's even a problem for the people who study agriculture. Is there something we're putting in the water? Is there something so this is a multidisciplinary problem. So our problems are no longer confined to one discipline, so we cannot be. Number two, we must start to imagine solutions from a problem-led lens. So I said the problem is climate change. How do we solve climate change? It cannot be from one discipline. And so the person who is working on climate change in one discipline, we've seen for you, Daktari, the project you had, you're doing modeling, somebody else is doing AI, somebody else is doing agriculture, somebody else is doing this. That becomes a collaborative project that is multidisciplinary, and you're solving one problem. The problem here is high HIV prevalence in youth. How do we tackle this? First of all, we have to get to the models. These are the statistics. What are we doing with these statistics? We cannot be like, I don't know if it's called Kenyans.com, where they start to, we see them every other 2 to 3 months, they put out these statistics. or there is high prevalence of unfaith comes to what I wanted to say about data-driven approaches. Whose data? Whose data is it? Why that data? How is it being collected? And even as it's being collected, is it inclusive? Is it because most of our data, and we've seen this in some of our own research at Mawazo Institute, we've seen this across the board. Most data is collected in a very skewed manner, either skewed in terms of it's very patriarchal, it is exclusive. And I'll give you an example. When Outer Ring Road in Nairobi was being built, that was a big project. Was it multidisciplinary? They brought in the engineers and the engineers did what they did. Were there spaces for people to walk? No. There were no pedestrian walkways. There was nothing. Were there spaces for people with disabilities to use? No. If you go to downtown Nairobi today, south of Moi Avenue, if you're a person with a wheelchair, it is impossible to walk in that town. It's even impossible for you to get there because which matatus, which buses that are being used in the public have facilities and spaces for people with disabilities? None, I can tell you, none, zero. So if you have a disability, Nairobi is not for you. If you cannot see, if you cannot walk, if you cannot hustle, you know, we've been using that word a lot, we're hustling. If you cannot hustle and push and shove, you cannot then do business in Nairobi, you cannot survive in Nairobi. It means that that city and the way it's been planned is not inclusive. Because the people who are thinking about it, and I always give this example at my university, which is the Technical University. When you enter the senior common room is on first floor. And there's a beautiful ramp that leads from, as you enter into the senior common room. But I always ask, who was this ramp built for? Because it stairs from ground floor to first floor. Would you be catapulted onto there then for you to use the ramp if you had a wheelchair, for example? These are some of the things. So we must start to think interdisciplinarity. We must start to think about how we are collecting data, who is collecting data, and what it's being collected for. Number 3, futures thinking. I told you I worked in market research and it led me to Nigeria and to many other countries across the continent. Every time I asked people, where do you see yourself in 10 years? They would say, that's too long. Like, please, allow us to at least even finish the day. Kenyans talk like, unaongea mambo ya next year. I mean, we are still here. Let's finish this one first. At first it was, let's finish this COVID, wacha tumalize hii COVID kwanza. So we have, unfortunately, I don't know if it's our education system. I know everybody blames the education system, even though we are trying our best as educationists and academics and, I don't know if it's the education system, but we are unable to think into the future. And future does not mean 5 years from now, it doesn't mean 10 years from now. If you think 100 years from now, when I asked you to ask that question, people like, but I won't even be here. It doesn't matter. But it matters. Because some of the work we are doing, some of the innovations we are creating now are going to be used by our grandchildren. I know somebody who is working on a cancer drug today, one of the fellows from the second cohort. By the time this drug goes into clinical trials, if it gets that far, and then goes into production, and then goes into the fight with Big Pharma before now it's accepted, and goes through all the checks, she might as well not be alive. That's the truth, unfortunately. And I'll come back to point number 4. That is the truth. Because we have a lot of bureaucratic and political bottlenecks and fences to jump when it comes to these kinds of innovations. I know somebody right now who has created a very affordable menstrual pad. But because they have been unable to get it to KEBS for them to do the checks and to all this, it's just sitting in a house. She wants to give it out even to girls in the rural areas. But because it doesn't have a KEBS approval, it's sitting there. It's been sitting there for some years. Does it mean we give up because we are not going to be here when these innovations come to pass? No. We have to do it. Even if you're not going to do it for ourselves, let's do it for, so when we think about Kenya we are now in 2023, there's a Vision 2063, I think, by the AU, which was launched in 2015. If you go through that document, if you look at the Africa that is in their vision, it's beautiful. People are not poor, there's water everywhere, there are green spaces, the forest cover has been, it's beautiful. Is it an aspirational future? Yes. Is it possible to achieve? My answer to that question is yes. But what we are doing in 2023 is going to determine if we achieve that or not. What we do about the environment now is going to determine whether we live in a desert, whether it will be an alpine desert or a hot one, it doesn't matter. Whether we live in a desert or we might not even be there, whether our grandchildren live in a desert or not, depends on what we do now. So we have to start thinking in terms of, we have to start activating futures thinking. The things we are doing now are not necessarily for ourselves. The innovations are not for us. The people who started thinking of AI, for example, way back in the day, whether it was very, very rudimentary, may not be alive today. And I know we don't like to think about that. The people who started thinking about interstellar travel, some of them wrote books and they imagined these far-flung places. If you look at Frank Herbert's Dune, for example, which is now a famous movie, and it's a great book. If you can read it. I told you I'm a literary scholar as well. This person was not thinking about themselves. We are talking about things that he created, these people created, and they're no longer here with us. That's what we are using. Diapers. I have a very interesting story about diapers, and I'm about to close because I know I'm standing between you and lunch. Diapers were invented I think in the 1950s. And the reason they were invented were not for children or babies. They were invented for space travelers. People said, imagine if people go to space and there are no toilets in the spacecraft. What would they use in terms of going to the bathroom? Then they started thinking about, we can use this kind of... At the end of the day, diapers were invented. I had this story at the Nexus Space Conference which happened in Nairobi in February. But then everybody said, but we can use this on babies as well, because we mean if we introduce this and we move from the cloth diapers, we can move and create this for babies. And everybody said, brilliant idea. And now everybody knows about Pampers and Huggies and all these things. But they were not, someone was solving a problem for the future and ended up solving a problem that, I don't know if it was a problem because everybody says diapers feel, they're polluting the environment, etc. That's a different conversation. The point is, someone was solving a problem for the future and then ended up solving a problem in the present. So that is the essence of futures thinking, right? And the fourth one is policy engagement. Again, we in the academy have been accused of sitting in the ivory tower. How many policy decisions are we influencing? Policy. We are a very anti-politics machine. We don't want to appear political. This is academia, we are a neutral space, but you're not really neutral. Things that are happening at the national government, at the county governments, end up affecting us where we are sitting. All these things are finding us even in our bedrooms. The price of tokens will find you in your bedroom, because if in the middle of the night your lights are going off, isn't it not finding you inside your house? So I think it's time for the academy to become bold and active in terms of policy engagement. The academy was very silent, or if they were not silent, they were not openly, vocal with the past finance bill, for example, and many other bills that are being proposed or have been passed in the parliament. Apart from even those bills, for our students and for our innovators, how are we helping them go through into the policy space? We are trying that as Mawazo, but it would be nice to have, a critical mass. How are we pushing these innovations? How are we ensuring that these innovations are not dying in our libraries, are dying in our labs? So how are we getting them from the research stage into the clinical trial stage, if it's that kind of an innovation, or from that into mass production or into our communities and into our populations. How are we doing this? So there has to be a way in which we as the academy, and by academy I mean the global academy, we have to find ways that we begin to become very active in the policy space. Funding is a sticky one. It's a sticky one because our academy is basically not very well funded. I've shown you of the GDP in the world, the one that is dedicated to research is very low. I don't know if someone has the figures for Kenya, the amount of money from GDP that we dedicate to higher education. I think it's quite low, but we need funding. And where are we getting funding? The places we're getting funding right now are from international organizations. And international organizations have, and some universities as well, have partnered with us to give funding to our fellows and our beneficiaries. Would it be nice to have more African funders doing the same? Yes. Do we have African funders and philanthropists who have deep pockets? Do we? Yes. What are they doing with this money? Building malls, big buildings and apartments in Nairobi. Is there a way we can engage them as the academy to channel some of that funding into research? Yes, and I think we should think about that. And the reason I say this is because sometimes, rightfully so, because it's not our money, funders' money will come with the agenda of the funder. That's the bottom line. We will not say no to the money because we want you to do your PhD. And we know that one of the key barriers, especially for women to finish their PhDs, is that they don't have money to do the research. You need, even if it's 50,000 shillings, to move from here to the rural and hire a car and go and collect data somewhere and bring it back. That needs money. We will take the money and give you. But if the funder says we cannot fund people above the age of 35, for example, or the age of 30, we cannot do that, our hands are tied. But we know that majority of our students tend to do their PhDs later in life. Why? You'll get a baby in the middle there. I got my first child in the middle of my PhD, so I know what I'm saying. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? We get children, we get families, we get sick relatives, your mother is sick, or your mother is dead. How do you continue with your PhD and you've just buried your mom? So many of these things, some of them are personal, and some of them are societal, means that you'll probably end up finishing your PhD after 4 or 5 years. If you have a good supervisor, you'll finish in 3 or 4. If you're not aligned with your supervisor, and sometimes that is what students do, you disappear for 3 months, you disappear for 1 year, then you reappear. Mwalimu, please, can you read this urgently? And the Mwalimu is like, first of all, they're like, who are you? They've even forgotten they were supervising you because you vanished and you disappeared. And now you've reappeared with data and they're like, where are you getting this data from? If you're not aligned with your supervisor, you could even finish your PhD in 10 years. So you'll finish when you're above 30. And if the funder says we can't, we need to fund young people who are below the age of 30, unfortunately it means you're locked out, right? So we need more homegrown funding. We need more funding that does not necessarily have very heavy restrictions, because the restrictions will be there. Because they'll ask you, why should we fund this person and this person is 40? Let's fund the young ones who they can still move around. And they have a point, isn't it? But we know our realities are different. So what do? It means we need to think about funding. We need to find ways as an academy to find ways of getting the money from wherever it is, whether it's the county governments, the national government, African philanthropists. I know there are some philanthropists who are around, the people with a bit of a deep pocket. How do we get them to bring the money into research? These are some of the things that and of course we have on the screen the Wellcome Trust, Bill and Melinda Gates, USAID, NIH. That is the percentage of Africa-based research funding granted to African-based research institutions. So there's money, it's out there, but it's restricted, and we have to work hard to bring it here. So how do we make sure that the money is here, the money is not restricted, and the money is going to you to make sure that you have something that is tangible? So for me, those were the key points, because I was answering some key questions you were asking about funders and how we get money from the funder to the person, the beneficiary, the fellow, the person who is doing the research. So, and perhaps that is one of the weaknesses. I know you've all done this in your research classes. That could be one of the weaknesses of the quantitative models. They're very clinical, they look at the numbers, and they might lack the context. And that is why interdisciplinarity, especially when you're thinking of data-driven and context-driven, aspects, interdisciplinarity has to come in. I will end with another story as I sit down. I know I'm preventing you from lunch. I'll end with this story. I spoke to somebody who did research.
That is a combination of what has been going on here for the last 3-4 days. We have a conference organized by members of our faculty, together with other members that are collaborating with from other universities within Africa and also outside Africa, in Europe. And the conference was known as, it's a workshop actually, known as a hackathon workshop. They will tell you what that means, on the computational modeling to unleash the computational power of young African researchers. So of course, there's a lot of jargon there, there's a lot of mathematics and computers and many other things, but they will give you the details. But for me, what I want to say is that, yes, the workshop has been going on since Tuesday, and it will conclude tomorrow. But for today, they had a public lecture, because then they also wanted to disseminate this and involve many more players. So we have a lot of people gathered in this whole year, like you've seen, and also we have others that are joining online. And the issue, the theme of the workshop and the conference is to show the importance of multidisciplinary research, whereby they are bringing people from different research themes or areas on disciplines, so that they are able to work together to be able to benefit the society. And the emphasis is that if you are mathematician, you cannot just stick to your mathematics only, because then you find very soon that will be very limited. And what they are doing is they have brought together mathematicians, people who are who work in the area of computer, people who are biologists, and other disciplines. And this is really the essence of this conference that is ongoing here, and also the essence of today's public lecture. Thank you.
Something you...
Thank you. Actually, if you have followed the presentations that have come forth as in the public lecture, you will find the different researchers who are involved. And one researcher would start and they say, this is, according to my knowledge, this is the far I could go. But then the other person in the other discipline then starts from there. And then it goes a while, and then the other one, another one from another discipline, then takes that research to conclusion. And therefore you find them in then collaborating that way, they are able to come up with the products that are then useful to all of us. And I think really that is the essence. And in my opening remarks, I was encouraging students that they need to be involved in multidisciplinary research. Of course, the way we are structured here at the university is more like silos, where if a student is in ecology, we want them to work in ecology. If they are in literature, we just want them to work in literature, because then that's how they will do their thesis, that's how they will write their academic thesis. But I think we are challenging ourselves, or this, the essence of this workshop is to challenge ourselves to go beyond there, and what we call to think outside the box, so that then we are able to embrace enter and mountain discipline in the way we do our things. And that was the essence of challenging the student that they need to think a little bit more broadly and correct data that will be able to answer the different facets of the problems that are facing communities. Very much. I think as an institution, as a university, we are doing a lot to encourage women in that space, in that science, and to be able to come up and be able to compete on the same level ground with men. Of course, they will tell you, and as you've seen in the presentations, we have many challenges that affect women, and especially when they start climbing the ladder. And the issue, the challenge is not really for the University of Embu alone, but is something that is a global challenge, and especially so in the developing or the less developed countries. So, and you have seen the statistics as they were given. You have seen the numbers, not very encouraging, especially when you start going to the top. But what we do here is we encourage women by giving them scholarships. For example, we give scholarships to students to pursue masters, at least in that area. And even at school, then we have two that are tying a lady and a gentleman, and we have only one scholarship. We will definitely go for the lady, because then we want to encourage the ladies. We also do what we call affirmative action to ensure that even as we give these scholarships, we want to give them 50%, 50%. So if we see like the number for the ladies is coming down, then we will do affirmative action to ensure that we have ladies coming up at the expense of men. And I want to say, since we started this program, really we have supported more ladies to do scholarships to have university scholarships than men themselves. That does not mean that we are discriminating, but we think we will also be helping in a way to improve those figures that we have seen that don't look very encouraging as we go up the ladder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this project that has brought together all these all these organizations and all these researchers started at a point where we were trying to seek how solutions to help the Kenyan youth reduce the high HIV/AIDS prevalence. We have noticed that the youth have poor HIV/AIDS test-seeking behavior, and it's because sometimes the solutions or where they can seek for the HIV test is not friendly. They could meet someone who can discourage them or judge them. Basically, when you see a young person, a 20-year-old person looking for a HIV test, they get to have that fear and that stigma feeling of it. So we are trying to see then how can we encourage HIV test seeking, increase HIV/AIDS awareness? How can we encourage HIV protection among the youth in Kenya? Are there other ways? Because over the years there have been so many interventions that have been meted to the youth. It's a priority right now for the National AIDS Control Council. And it's interesting to see that with all these interventions in place, uptake among the youth is extremely poor. So we then came to a point then wondering how can we collaborate to ensure that we come up with an innovative product that could help the youth access information, correct information, and know where to seek for help without feeling judged. That is how we came across that bridge of then using bridging computational modeling and artificial intelligence to ensure that we develop a tool, a product that can use. I think we understand the way ChatGPT works. Sometimes you put in something and you get an information. The same way WhatsApp works. You know, you talk with WhatsApp, though it's two-faced. You put in a query and or whatever conversation you have, and you get a response from the other person. So the other person in our case will be the chatbot, who will now be a friend to this Kenyan youth. Whatever question on HIV, And, we are customizing it, making it friendly. We are calling it Beshte, you are a friend. It's a friend, so that in your safe space, wherever you are,